Welcome, everyone, to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. This is our first lesson of Masechet Yevamot. So, first of all, welcome to any new learners who are with us today. We have a lot to do today, and I want to begin. Today, we are actually I'm going to try to review Daf 2 till Daf 8. Again, for those of you who are new to Daf Yomi, the Masechet starts on Daf 2, on Daf Bet. There are numerous explanations for this. Again, one is that the cover page is the first page. Another one is there is no beginning or end to Torah. It is a vast sea that we are just a part of. Another is that the first page is the page of what's called Derech Eretz, of being a good person. And then at page 2, we begin in the Gemara. But I'd like to give an introduction to Masechet Yevamot. As Lynn pointed out, you can see here on the slide, there is a sandal. This shoe is a very specific shoe that we will talk about in a minute. So let's talk about this Masechet. So the idea here is we're going to talk about Yibum. Yibum is the idea that if a married man dies and he doesn't have any children, his brother needs to marry his widow. This is called Yibum, in English, a Levirate marriage. Now, what is the purpose? The Torah tells us that what does this do? It keeps the deceased brother's name alive. Lekayem Shem. We are going to establish a name for the brother, i.e., having a descendant, a child. We see this happen in the Torah, not in exactly the same way, but Yehuda, it starts off in the same way. Yehuda has a son. The son is married to Tamar. The son dies. The next brother marries Tamar. That son dies. Yehuda does not or his third son does not marry Tamar. In the end, Yehuda marries Tamar. And we can say they all live happily ever after, but we'll get to that another time. So we're going to see a number of factors here, and we're going to see how this Masechet will get a little complicated. I will try to explain as much as possible, but we're going to see in the Gemara that Yibum can be done by any brother. The wife is prohibited from marrying anybody outside the family, meaning as soon as her husband dies, she has, we'll see in a minute, a connection to these brothers, and one of them needs to do Yibum. If a brother, or we'll see later on, or if the wife, if they do not want to do Yibum, there's a ceremony that they can do, and this ceremony is called Halita. And this ceremony basically releases their obligation to marry each other. And then the wife can marry, again, the widow can marry anyone outside of the family. The ceremony is done with this shoe or sandal that you see here in the picture. And we're going to learn a lot more about this. But basically, the widow removes this shoe and she spits in front of him, not on him. Some people think on him, not on him. And she says certain verses. Just some terms. The brother who is going to marry the widow is called the Yavam. Again, he is going to do Yibum, so he is called the Yavam. The widow is called the Yivama. Right, she is going to do Yibum as well. Another term is called Zika. Zika means that there's a connection, or they're tied together, the widow and any of the surviving brothers. Another term is Ma'amar. Ma'amar is when, I guess we would say, is when the brother decides that he's going to marry the widow, he does what's called ma'amar, and this is like betrothing the woman. Even though, again, as we said, there's already a connection, so it's not called kiddushin, which is regular betrothal. Rather, it's called ma'amar. Um, and the last term that I just want to explain is the term tsara. The word tsara means, like, if anybody knows the word like tsaris, means, right, trouble or problems. In the Mishnah, the word tsara means a co-wife or a rival wife, or what we would call maybe a sister wife. Again, to remember, we are dealing in the times, definitely in the times of in the Mishnah and in the Gemara. There is polygamy, meaning a man is allowed to marry more than one woman, and therefore those women are called co-wives or tsarot. And this is going to, you will see, maybe we'll call it complicate issues or not complicate issues as we begin. So let's begin on daf 2. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see these actually. Hold on. Again, I'll open the chat box if anybody wants to ask a question. These slides were created by the website Hadran. Some of you might listen to my shiur through the Hadran website, and these slides, there are a lot. So I'm actually we'll see, either I won't go through all of them or we'll go through them quickly, but they visualize all of the relationships that we're about to discuss. So the first Mishnah on Daf 2 tells us that there are 15 women who are prohibited to the brother. Again, we just set up the case. There's a man, he's married to a woman, he dies without any children. The woman must now marry the brother. However, the Mishnah tells us that that's not the case in every single relationship, because there are going to be certain relationships that the brother is not allowed to marry the wife. And we're going to go through, again, there are 15 of them. You can see them here on the screen. His daughter, his daughter's daughter, his son's daughter. We'll go through each one. You can read them here. And the Mishnah also tells us that not only is Yibum not done with the woman who is prohibited, but also the co-wives are also exempt from Yibum. And not only the co-wives, but the co-wives of the co-wives. So let's just, I'll just show you, hold on 1 minute, let's see if I can do it. Okay. So I'm going to show you some of these slides. Again, there are a lot here. So I just want to make sure that you just see what we're talking about. Here you have a relationship, okay? And in all of these slides, you're going to see brothers, right? The brothers are the same color, and a child is going to be a lighter color, right? So Reuven, we generally use Reuven, Shimon. So Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Reuven has a daughter. Now, the daughter, right, Reuven's brother Shimon marries Yael, and we see he's also married to another woman. So now if Shimon dies, X means he dies, so if Shimon dies, Reuven cannot marry Yael because that is his daughter, and he's not allowed to marry his daughter, and he also does not have to marry or cannot marry Shula, who is the co-wife to Yael, because of that relationship. The Mishnah also tells us that, let's say there's another brother, and the other brother, Levi, does marry Shula because he's not related to Yael or to Shula, so he marries her. And now when Levi dies, Reuven does not need to marry any of the wives. However, says the Gemara, if the daughter dies first and then the husband dies, now Reuven can marry Shula. Okay, I hope that was not too complicated. But basically, each slide is going to go through another relationship. So we'll do another one, and then we can do them quickly. Because once we get the idea, we understand how it works, right? Again, now Ruvain, the next case, so the first case was his daughter. Now it's his daughter's daughter, meaning his granddaughter. So you can see here, Yael is his granddaughter. Shimon marries Yael and another woman. Shimon dies. Ruvain, right, does not marry Yael or Shula, right? Again, if the other brother does, they're all exempt. If Yael dies first, then Shimon dies, then Ruvain can marry Shula. Okay, again, now it's instead of it's still a granddaughter, but instead of it being the daughter of the daughter, it's the daughter of the son, and it's going to be the same case. So it's the same idea. Okay, now it gets a little more complicated. We have a woman, she's married, she has a daughter. She gets divorced and she marries somebody else. She now marries Ruvain. Okay, Ruvain now has a brother, Shimon. Now Shimon marries Yael. Now again, Yael is not related to Shimon, so that's okay. But again, if Shimon dies, Yael is Ruvain's wife's daughter, and therefore he cannot marry her, and he does not have to marry the co-wife. And as we said, it extends if there's another brother. If the daughter dies first and then Shimon dies, then he can marry the co-wife. Again, second generation of the same case. So I'm just going to do that quickly. The second generation, again, from a daughter or from a son, same idea. Okay, now we're going to go in a different direction, which is instead of going down, daughter, granddaughter, we're going to go up, mother-in-law, right? So here, Reuven is married to Tamar, and now his brother Shimon marries his mother-in-law. Again, that's not a problem. It's Reuven's mother-in-law. The same idea. If Shimon dies, Reuven cannot marry his mother-in-law, nor can he marry the co-wife. And again, the same thing. If another brother marries her, everybody's exempt. If the mother-in-law dies first and then Shimon dies, Reuven can marry Shula. Again, now we're going up another generation, right? The mother of the mother-in-law, right? If Shimon marries the grandmother-in-law, the same case. I'm really sorry that I'm going fast, but I think you get the idea of how this works. The same thing, mother-in-law, but from the father's side as opposed to from the mother's side. Okay, here's another case. His maternal half-sister, right? Again, we have two brothers, and now we have a wife from, again, we have a sister. Ooh, sorry about that. We have a sister from another marriage. Again, the son is marrying his half sister. Again, sorry. Let me rephrase. The man is not marrying his half sister. The man's brother is marrying a woman that he's not related to. But if he dies, the woman falls to his half, right, to the woman falls to her half brother, and therefore that is problematic. And then again, if she dies first, then it is permitted. And again, here we have his mother's sister. Again, I'm really sorry I'm going so fast. These are a lot of relationships. We will see them again later on. But I think it's interesting just to see how everybody is either related or not related. When they are related, they are not allowed to marry each other. When they are not related, they are allowed to marry each other. Okay, his wife's sister, this one, I mean, they're all important, but this one we're going to discuss a little later on. So we have, again, two sisters. They marry two brothers. That's actually my grandparents. I have, my grandparents were, right, a brother married, right, two brothers married two sisters. So now, right, that's totally fine. Two brothers marrying two sisters. The problem is that when, right, one of the brothers dies, so now, Reuven cannot marry Ruth, right, Shimon's wife because she is the sister of his wife, and that is a not permissible relationship, and therefore he cannot marry her, neither, right, not the co-wife or the co-co-wife. But again, if she dies first, then it is permitted. And then the, again, maternal half-brother's wife. So we see that here. Again, sorry for getting, right, again, that is okay. But now when they die, they cannot marry each other because really they are related. Everybody becomes exempt, all the co-wives. Again, but if they die, again, then the co-wife is permitted if all the relations die before the man who needs to do Yibum dies. I'm really sorry that I'm going so fast. You can slow it down. Okay, here's another one we're going to mention at the end of today's daf. The wife of his brother who died before he was born. And basically it means that there's going to be a baby brother that is going to be born after the original husband dies. So let's see the case. Again, there's Reuven and Shimon. Reuven is married to Tamar. Reuven dies. Shimon marries Tamar. Okay, that's doing Yibum. Now what happens? Now Levi is born, and now Shimon dies. Levi does not marry any of the women, right? He does not have to do Yibum because he was not alive when his brother, who he needs to do Yibum for, was alive. So if there is a brother that was only born after the original brother died, he does not do Yibum. So that is this case. And again, we're going to extend it even further, that everybody becomes exempt. Again, of course, if Levi was born before Shimon dies, then he can marry the wife. Okay, last case. Again, I'm so sorry, but we're still on the first Mishnah. The last case is his daughter-in-law, right? Reuven has a son and a brother. The son gets married. The son dies. Now, right, again, his brother marries that woman, right, meaning his daughter-in-law, then another wife, then the brother dies. Reuven now cannot marry Yael because she originally was his daughter-in-law, right? And again, so too, if there are other co-wives, they are all exempt. If she dies first, then and then Shimon dies, then she is permitted. Okay, I really hope that was okay. We are now going to proceed on back to Daf 2. And okay, so let's go back. We mentioned all the 15 people, and we discussed how, again, sometimes they can do Yibum and sometimes they cannot. And again, if they died or they were divorced beforehand, then they could do Yibum to the co-wife. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, let's go. So that was the end of the Mishnah. Let's go to the Gemara at the bottom of Daf 2. The Gemara tells us that all these women, all women are learnt from the wife's sister. Remember, I said that one is an important case. It's an important case because that one is where we have a verse that says that a wife's sister is, right, that a man cannot marry his wife's sister, right? The co-wife from the wife's sister. And then the Gemara asks why was it this order in the Mishnah? Again, the order of daughter, granddaughter, and then mother-in-law, the grandmother-in-law. The Gemara asks, maybe it's by severity, right? If you have relations with your daughter, it's much worse. A more severe punishment. The Gemara says no. Daughter is first because it's from an interpretation of a specific verse, and the other ones are extrapolated from that, and therefore the daughter comes first. Daf 3 tells us we only know about the daughter, again, from this interpretation, and therefore she is mentioned first. And then we continue with the generation. So we start with the daughter, and then we go down, and then, again, we go up, and then we go over across to sisters. The Gemara says, no, that's not the order. Maybe the order is, the closeness to the person, right? First hand, second hand, third hand, or right, first, second, and third generations. As we said, first you go down, then you go up, and then you go across, as I mentioned, to sisters. When we use the word exempt, it means no Yibum, and then the question is, no Yibum, and then you do Halita, or you're exempt completely, no Yibum, no Halita. Again, to remind us, Yibum means that you get married. Halita means you do the ceremony, and everybody goes on their own way. Now there's a discussion, and we'll see it later on in the Masechet. What's better? Is it better to do Yibum or Halita? So Abba Shaul says it's better to do Halita than Yibum. Interestingly enough, the Torah tells us the opposite. It's better to do Yibum than Halita. And this we're going to talk about later on in the Masechet. So we said 15 women are counted twice in the Mishnah, and the question is why, right? If the wife is suspected of adultery before he dies, then when he dies, she's exempt. And this is like an exclusion of all that wasn't really mentioned in our list, and therefore the fact that it's repeated teaches us somebody else. Who else could it include? If one of the wives is a minor, right? So then after he dies, then not only is she exempt, but so too the co-wife is also exempt. Or maybe the case is if one of the wives was divorced from the husband and then married someone else and then remarried the original husband, which is not okay. That is not allowed. So that exempts the co-wife from Yibum as well, right? All of these are constructing cases where it's not a regular marriage. So the Gemara tells us that you cannot marry a woman and her sister, right, as we mentioned before. This is called erva, right? This is I guess we would say an illicit relationship or a prohibited relationship, and therefore they are not allowed to marry each other. However, right, we say that in the case of Yibum, right, maybe it would be okay. And here we're going to start a very lengthy discussion about who is okay, right, who you're allowed to marry and who you are not allowed to marry. And the Gemara tells us that again, a man is not allowed to marry his brother's wife. So then how could it be that he does Yibum? The Gemara tells us at the bottom of Daf 3 a very important principle. In Hebrew we say aseh doche lo taseh, which means a positive commandment is going to suspend a negative commandment. What does that mean? The positive commandment of having to do Yibum is going to suspend the prohibition of marrying one's brother's wife, right? And therefore we say that the brother can marry, right, the widow of his brother. However, that doesn't work for all the other relationships, and that's what we're going to go through before. But before we get to that, the Gemara first questions if this principle is true. Can a positive commandment suspend a prohibition? And the Gemara says, well, wait a minute. One of these, the prohibition is very severe, right? The prohibition to marry one of these prohibited relations is actually karet, which is the most severe case that we know. And then maybe we're going to say that the positive commandment does not suspend a very severe prohibition, maybe only a regular assay, right? A regular prohibition would be okay. So now we're going to look for a source for this principle. The Gemara on Daf 4 tells us we learn it from tzitzit, right? The four-cornered garment. When it's written in the Torah, it's written next to the prohibition of shatnez. Shatnez is the prohibition of mixing wool and linen in one garment. The idea is that the tzitzit, the fringes of the garment, are actually wool, and the garment might be linen, and therefore we are going to actually have a garment that seemingly would be prohibited, but the Torah tells us that the positive commandment of tzitzit overrides shatnez, right? The prohibition of mixing materials. And so too, right here with Yibum, right? When the Gemara says that let's go back to tzitzit. That tzitzit is interpreted, and therefore it becomes a commandment that we need to do, or maybe it's because the word is extra. Again, remember in the Gemara, we're going to say that you can only interpret words that are superfluous. If they're not superfluous, we need them to teach what they're actually teaching. So the Gemara says, are these words superfluous? And then we can learn the idea that a positive commandment is can override the negative prohibition. So the Gemara continues and tells us that on Daf 5, there's a discussion or a disagreement whether certain words are extra or not. Again, as we said, we want them to be extra. The Gemara now goes to another case of the leper, of the mitzvah. At the end of the leper's quarantine, the leper needs to do a certain ceremony. Part of that ceremony is that they need to shave their entire body. Now, we know that a man is actually not allowed to shave his peot, right, the corners of his, the edges of his head. So the question is, how could it be that the leper, the mitzvah, is allowed to shave his entire body if you're not allowed to shave the corners of your head? And here the Gemara tells us that, again, the positive commandment of shaving the head trumps or overrides the negative commandment of shaving your peot, right, the corners of your head. The Gemara says that's really a weak argument because that's only a prohibition for men, not for women, and therefore that is weak. Maybe we learn it from a beard, right? The priest is not allowed to shave his beard, and again, if a priest becomes a leper, he needs to shave everything. And we say again, that is not so strong, and therefore it is not it's not superfluous, and we cannot learn from here. What about a Nazirite, a Nazir? They try again. The Nazir is not allowed to cut his hair or her hair, but if they get tsarat, if they get leprosy, again, we said you need to cut your hair. So again, competing factors. The Gemara says, well, no, that's not really a good case because a Nazir is a vow, and you can annul your vow, and therefore it doesn't really, it's not really a very strong, proof. Let's try again. Let's go back to tzitzit. Again, we're looking for superfluous words. And we find certain words that the Gemara says are extra, and therefore that seems to be the source that, again, the asay, the positive commandment, is doche, suspends or trumps the lo taseh. So then the Gemara goes back to this idea. But what about if what about if there's an issue of karet, the lota say the negative, the prohibition is very stringent. Does it still work? So the Gemara says yes. It's learned from Brit Milah, right, from circumcision, that you are allowed to do circumcision on Shabbat. So what do we see? Again, you're not allowed to harm yourself on Shabbat. However, the positive commandment of doing Brit Milah, it does override Shabbat. And again, Shabbat is very stringent. So the Gemara says, no, that maybe that doesn't count because Brit Milah is very important. The Gemara tells us that it says the word covenant 13 times when dealing with Brit Milah. So therefore, that would not be a good example. Maybe we can learn it from Pesach, or maybe we learn it from the Korban Tamid, right? The daily sacrifice that's brought on Shabbat. And again, that seems to override Shabbat. Both are very strong assays, positive commandments. So the Gemara says maybe we won't learn from each one because individually maybe they're not strong enough, but maybe we can learn if we group them together, right? So maybe we can learn from circumcision and Pesach. Both of those are karet. Or maybe we can learn from Pesach and Tamid. Both of those are sacrifices. Or maybe we can learn from circumcision and the Tamid, the sacrifice, because both of those are given before Matan Torah, before we receive the Torah. But the Gemara says we can't learn from all three. And therefore, interestingly, the Gemara tells us, wait a minute, I have an example at the bottom of Daf 5 that honoring your parents does not override Shabbat. Right? Everyone in the Gemara tells us, and this I think is a beautiful idea and an important idea, that everyone is obligated in keeping Shabbat, and therefore, if your parents tell you to override Shabbat, to transgress the Shabbat, you do not listen to your parents and you keep the Shabbat. So here, actually, we see that something does not override Shabbat. The Gemara says, well, there's a special teaching to teach this specific case, but in general, it would override Shabbat. Daf 6 tells us that, again, as we mentioned, right, if a parent asks a child to transgress any commandment, you do not listen to them. Sorry about that.
So, for example, I just have a question. So, for example, if they said you can drive on Shabbos, I mean, can you drive me somewhere on Shabbos? You know, Torah tells you honor your father and mother. However, Torah tells you not to light a fire. So you're saying that not to light the fire would be the correct path to follow and to not listen to your mother and father.
Correct. In this case, in general, we should listen to your parents. But if they tell you to transgress the Shabbat, then you are not obligated. You do not follow their wishes in that case. Again, with respect and in the nicest way, but one needs to keep the Shabbat. Yes, excellent question. Okay. Again, the Gemara brings another example that building the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, did not override Shabbat. And again, the Gemara says maybe this is a particular case and it doesn't teach us the rule. The Gemara tells us, again, as we mentioned, and you mentioned as well, right? You cannot light a fire on Shabbat. It's singled out specifically. And the Gemara says, right, why is it singled out? Again, we have a general prohibition from work on Shabbat. Maybe it's singled out because this actually does not have, it's actually a lower level and you do not get the same punishment for this as other things. Or, says the Gemara, it actually teaches us that every single transgression of Shabbat gets its own punishment. And here we're I don't want to say we're a little off topic because we're talking about transgressing the Shabbat. But the Gemara now talks about, again, we're talking about different things that can override other prohibitions. And now the Gemara talks about what about putting someone to death on Shabbat, meaning to execute on Shabbat, meaning a court found that the person in the court is subject to execution. Are they allowed to execute that person on Shabbat? Again, here we're going to say that they are going to execute the person with what's called sreifa, which is burning. Interestingly enough, it's not what you would think, right? It's not like burning someone at the stake. They didn't burn the person. They actually melted lead, or I think it was lead. They would melt it and then pour it down their throat and actually like burn them from the inside. It's horrible. But again, here is you would have to light a fire in order to do this. Does it trump Shabbat? And the Gemara says it does not trump Shabbat. The Gemara on Daf 7 tries to play with different things that override different prohibitions, right? So the Gemara tells us that worship in the temple does override Shabbat, right? We know, and we've learned in previous Masechtot that they were able to bring different sacrifices on Shabbat. It's part of the Shabbat observance. So we see that worship or avodah in the temple overrides Shabbat. And interestingly enough, capital punishment or execution overrides doing work in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, right? So if there's nobody around and a Kohen has to execute somebody, and it's also time, or they need to give a korban, a sacrifice, capital punishment trumps or overrides doing that work in the temple. You can take, or sorry, I take it back. The case here on Daf 7 is that it's the priest who is chayav, who is the one who is on trial, and he is the one who needs to get killed. You take him away from doing the avodah, the work in the Beit HaMikdash, and you execute him. So that's the case. So therefore, right, we're doing a logic proof, right? If A trumps B and B trumps C, so maybe A should trump C. I hope that was clear, right? So again, work in the temple trumps Shabbat, killing trumps execution trumps work in the temple. So therefore, maybe capital punishment should trump Shabbat, right? And the Gemara basically says, no, this is not the case, and it does not trump Shabbat. And therefore, we still don't have a proof that a positive commandment can override a very severe negative, right, a prohibition. So again, the Gemara says on Daf 7, maybe a regular positive commandment doesn't override a prohibition that's punishment is karet. Or maybe there's no difference, meaning once you're overriding. And therefore, we need a special verse to teach us that it is not, that we do not override. Again, let's just repeat for a minute. We said that Yibum is, we are overriding the negative commandment of a man marrying his brother's wife. However, we said that Yibum, that positive commandment, does not override all the other prohibited relationships. And the question is why? And we said that there's a specific verse that teaches us this. So again, the Gemara asks on Daf 7, right, why would I need a specific verse to teach us this if I know, if I say that the punishment is karet, this is very severe, and therefore, in general, it wouldn't override this prohibition, right? The assumption is that it would override the prohibition. So the Gemara continues and tells us that the verse that teaches Eshet Ach, meaning the wife of his brother, that verse was singled out to teach us something specific, and then it goes back to the general category, right? And maybe this is another principle. I don't know if you remember, we learned that there are 13 principles of Rabbi Yishmael in which we are able to understand the verses in the Torah, right? One of those is Kal Vachomer or Hekesh, right? There are different rules or principles that we use. Here the Gemara says maybe we should use the principle of a general category that exists. Then the Torah takes out something from that general category, meaning it specifies something in particular with a certain law. And then we say, why was it taken out? So that we can bring it back to the general category and learn that rule for all of the details in that general category. So the Gemara says, again, normally your brother's wife is prohibited. It was singled out to say that sometimes it's okay, right? Yibum. Therefore, maybe I can take it back and say, just like my brother's wife is okay, maybe all of those forbidden relationships, again, go back to the beginning of this class, right? All of those relationships, maybe those are also okay. The Gemara says, no, that's not the case. Rather, we are not going to use this principle of bringing it back to the general category. Rather, we're going to use a different principle. Why was the brother's wife singled out? To teach something specific about this case, but we do not bring it back to all the other cases unless there's a verse that connects the two together. And the Gemara gives us another case, an example of this. We're not going to go to that example, but it's talking about different sacrifices. But again, there was a general category. There was a specific rule taught about one of those details in the category, and the only way you can apply it back to the general category is if there is a specific verse. And therefore, because there isn't a specific verse, the Gemara concludes that we only permit the brother's wife, but not all the other prohibited relations. Okay, another principle, the Gemara says, well, wait a minute, maybe we can say that once you permit one thing, maybe I'll permit everything. And there's a case of this, the Gemara quotes a case at the bottom of Daf 7, where this actually happens, that something is forbidden, and then for whatever reason it becomes permitted, and then the Gemara says, since that's already being permitted, let's permit everything in order to facilitate this case. So maybe we can say the same thing here, right? Maybe once I permit the brother's wife, maybe I should permit all the other relationships. And the Gemara at the top of 8 says, no, we do not use this principle for Yibum. Rather, maybe it depends on when the prohibition was created, right? The Gemara tells us at the top of Daf 8, right, if it was never permitted in the first place, then it would not be permitted, right? And here, the Gemara mentions the case that I mentioned in the beginning, or one of the last cases that we mentioned, that if the brother was married to a woman, and then he died, and then another brother married the sister, right? The widow. You might have thought, um, again, that sorry, not that case. Sorry. The Gemara tells us that again, two brothers married two sisters. The brother dies, and then, sorry, I take it back. Let's start again. The brother was married, and then he dies, and then the other brother marries the sister, meaning it's not that, like we said in the beginning, two brothers married two sisters, and then the brother died. That obviously does not work, because the brother, the surviving brother, cannot marry his wife's sister. However, what if it went the other way around, right? Meaning, what if the relationship was created in a different order? So you might think that in that case, maybe he can marry, maybe he can marry the widow, because once it's already permitted to marry for Yibum, maybe it doesn't matter if the same woman is not only his brother's wife, but also his wife's sister. Okay, you're getting a good taste of what Yevamot is going to be like, but it's going to be great. Anyway, the Gemara tells us, no, that is not okay, and we need a verse to teach us that this is not okay. Or maybe we don't learn it from a verse, we learn it from, again, the fact that the brother's wife is permitted in Yibum. We do not extrapolate to other cases, and we do not say that all other cases would be permitted. The Gemara entertains for 1 minute or one line. Maybe everybody would be permitted, maybe nobody is permitted, and the Gemara says, no, you're going too far, and basically we need a verse to teach that the co-wives, right, the tzara, the co-wife of a forbidden relationship, of an erva, is forbidden to do Yibum, right? And that was the cases that we showed at the beginning. Again, we don't need a verse to teach us that a forbidden relationship doesn't need Yibum. We said that is clear, that is exempt, and therefore that the Gemara ends that idea here. The Gemara continues on Daf 8 and tells us that two words teach about the co-wives. Again, if you remember our picture, not only right, again, the prohibited relation, right? His daughter, his granddaughter, his mother's sister, right? Those women are clearly exempt from Yibum, but so too the co-wives as well. And therefore, the Gemara says that, right, otherwise, meaning not in a Yibum case, let's say in another scenario, you can marry the co-wife of someone who is prohibited, or the Gemara says, no. The verse teaches us that you can never marry the co-wife. Again, Daf 8 continues, maybe the erva, right, that prohibited relationship, maybe without Yibum would be okay. Obviously, the Gemara says no. Again, what the Gemara is trying to do is create scenarios where we test all of these principles, right? How far do we extend the prohibition or the exemption, right? And that is what the Gemara is trying to do. That, again, as we mentioned before, as long as the wife is alive, the husband is not allowed to marry her sister, even if they get divorced, right? If a man is married to a woman and she has a sister, if they get divorced, the man is not allowed to marry her sister. That is a forbidden relationship. And therefore, the Gemara tells us that would be forbidden. The last case, the last idea on Daf 8 is the words that the Yavam, the brother, takes the woman, right, the widow. He takes her and he does Yibum with her. What does that mean? What do we learn from here? Again, we learn that if you can't marry one of the wives, then you cannot marry any of the wives. Again, as we say, right, you take her, meaning you have to be able to marry any one of the wives. If you have any relationship with any one of the wives, then you are exempt from all the other. You're exempt from everybody. The last point on this daf is that, sorry, one more point, that the co-wife also is prohibited for Yibum, but in other cases it is okay. And now the last point is when it says to take her, it means the Gemara teaches us that when they do Yibum, right, again, Yibum is another form of marriage. And the Gemara tells us that once they perform Yibum, they are officially married, meaning that if they wanted to separate, they would actually need a get, a divorce contract in order to separate. And if they wanted to get remarried, they would be able to. And the last point, the Gemara tells us, V'yivama, and he does Yibum to her. The Gemara says, therefore, we learn that biblically a man can do Yibum against the woman's will. Right? Biblically, that would be okay. But don't worry, don't get upset. In a few daf, we are going to learn that that is not okay. The rabbis made a decree that that would not be okay, just like right, someone is not allowed to marry a woman against her will, so too you may not do Yibum against the woman's will. And therefore, we are going to see this later on. However, the Gemara does tell us that according to the text, meaning on a biblical level, it does work. Meaning, let's say the man doesn't listen and he does it anyway, that is seen as doing Yibum. However, that is something that is not okay on many levels. With that, we are going to end today's shiur. I apologize if it was too fast or it is complicated, and I hope that it was clear with the pictures. We are going to, it was a lot for today, and I know that when we start a new Masechet, there are a lot of things that we have to kind of absorb right away. We're kind of, as we mentioned at the beginning, we're kind of thrown right into it. But don't worry, meaning we have many daf. This is a pretty big Masechet. So we are going to deal with all the issues that we've mentioned in this first Mishnah. We're going to go through it slowly, but there will be charts and diagrams similar to what I showed you today. Again, I really thank Hadran for making those beautiful slides. I thought that they were very clear in terms of men, women, who's related to who. So I look forward to using those in the future. I want to wish everybody, first of all, a Shabbat Shalom, a Purim Sameach. So wishing everyone a wonderful Purim and a Shabbat Shalom. And next week it is going to be again at this time. So for those of you, right, we are now 6. Israel did not change the clocks yet. So next week it's going to be the same time as it was this week. And then we are going to change the clocks, and then we will kind of even out. So again, Purim Sameach to everyone, and really wishing you a wonderful week, and see you next week.